Coming up on We Talk News this week, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo signs the weed legalization bill as expected, but no one expected New Mexico to become the 18th state to legalize, and that state will open sales to adults next year. Mergers and acquisitions dominate cannabis business news this week, with Green Lane and Kushco combining to form a mega accessories company in California. And in the St. Patrick's Day Party Bowl, beer versus weed, who wins? We tell you on We Talk News next.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's We Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. Big week for legal weed in the U.S. The green wave for legalization continues in the United States, with not one, but 2 states now passing laws that will allow adult use and sale of cannabis. You all know about New York State's long journey that was finally signed by New York Governor Andrew Cuomo this week. However, did you know that New Mexico joined the fun? They call themselves the Land of Enchantment. And this week, their legislature agreed on a bill, and their governor there, Michelle Lujan Grisham, is ready to sign it. Sales of cannabis are targeted to begin on April 1st, 2022 in New Mexico. In the meantime, the impact of New York's legalization is already having a positive impact on the industry. We talked with Chris Walsh, CEO of MJBiz Daily, on last Friday's Green Rush about just that. Chris?
And I think that, we're going to see, thousands of business opportunities across the board with licenses, with ancillary companies, billions in sales. Is it 2, 3, 4 billion in the next 4 years? Who knows? But it's billions. It's multiple billions, and jobs, and it's going to revitalize communities in New York, and I think bring a lot of benefits to people in general. And it's a big tourist mecca. I mean, there's a lot to like about this. The regulations as we see them now, or the structure of this, look favorable. Now, it's not going to please everyone across the board. There's always, depending on where you sit, you're going to like things, you're not going to like things. But in general, I mean, there's social equity components. There's components carved out for small businesses. It's not going to be like some other states where you're only going to have a dozen companies that just dominate the whole industry. Like their current medical industry. I mean, there's a lot to like here.
So New York is the 17th legal state. New Mexico is the 18th state. And our friends at the NCIA sent out a release that kind of puts this whole green wave into perspective. Did you know over 40% of American adults now live in states that have passed adult use laws? So I ask, is federal reform on deck? In the meantime, let's check out what's happening on those markets, and who better to give us that update than our own Green Market Report's Deborah Borchardt. Deborah?
Markets are closed on Friday for the Good Friday holiday in the U.S. The accessories company Green Lane announced it was merging with the packaging company Kushco. Kushco's CEO Nick Kovacevic will be the new CEO of the combined company, while Green Lane shareholders will have a slight majority ownership. This came following Green Lane's earnings announcement that the 2020 revenue fell to $138 million from last year's $185 million. Earlier this week, the Chicago Tribune ran a story alleging that Green Thumb Industries was under federal investigation for possible pay-to-play violations. The article cited an unnamed source, and it was relatively vague, citing the exact time frame being unknown and the origin of the probe being unknown. Green Thumb denied there was any investigation and asked for a retraction, but the Tribune says it's standing by the story and continuing to pursue it. We have a couple of huge deals this week. Verano Holdings announced it was buying the Healing Center, valued at $110 million, and Air Wellness is buying the Garden State Dispensary, officially known as GSD&J, in a deal valued at $101 million. And those are the big news stories this week. I'm Deborah Borchardt from the Green Market Report for We Talk News.
Another state that's moving slowly towards opening their adult use market is Vermont. It seems whenever a governor endorses the market, the industry launches quick. When a governor opposes the launch, it takes 2 years, which was certainly the case here in Massachusetts. So what's going on in the Green Mountain State? Let's check in with Jessie Lynn Dolan, our Vermont green nurse.
Thanks, Jimmy. I'm Jessie Lynn Dolan from Nurse Grown Organics and Vermont Cannabis Nurses, and this is the Weed Talk News Vermont Report. Well, it took almost 3 months, but Governor Phil Scott finally named his nominees to the Cannabis Control Board. Many cannabis advocates believe this delay was always part of his strategy to slow the rollout of the Vermont market. Still subject to Senate confirmation, Governor Scott's candidates are James Pepper, a deputy state's attorney for the Department of State's Attorneys and Sheriffs, Julie Hulberd, a human resources director at the Vermont Student Assistance Corporation, and Kyle Harris, an agricultural development specialist at the Vermont Agency of Agriculture. James Pepper would chair the board, earning $107,000 annually. He is also on Vermont's racial disparities, criminal and juvenile justice system with experience including bail reform, crime expungement, and use of police force standards. He worked on cannabis issues as former Governor Peter Shumlin's Director of Intergovernmental Affairs and Senior Policy Advisor. Julie Hulberd has worked in human resources for over 20 years, including 12 in municipal government. While she seems like an unusual choice for the Cannabis Control Board, it's worth noting that as chair of the State Ethics Commission, she helped to revoke a controversial opinion in 2018 that was critical of Governor Scott's ties to a construction firm, saying the panel overstepped their legislative mandate. Quid pro quo, anyone? Kyle Harris works at the Agency of Agriculture, focused on dairy innovation, maple initiatives, and hemp business development. Also an attorney, he previously worked for the Environmental Affairs at the Corn Refiners Association in DC. Each board member will serve a 3-year term with a maximum of 3 terms. With the government-appointed board wielding so much power and starting behind the intended timeline, the Vermont cannabis community is extremely cautious about how Vermont's commercial cannabis future will unfold. That's the Vermont Report for Weed Talk News. I'm Vermont's cannabis nurse, Jessie Lynn Dolan.
Next week on the Green Rush Live show on Fridays at 4 on the Pro Cannabis Media Distribution Network, we talk about the art of the deal in the cannabis business. And one of the kings of the cannabis deals, Bruce Linton, will join us at the top of that show. One of his companies, Gage, is now asking the Canadian Stock Exchange for a direct listing on that exchange. The company was valued at $350 million in the fall of 2020 before their latest fundraising round. They operate the Cookies brand that rapper Burner is involved with and operates with a strong Michigan presence. Now here's the Canadian report from Solomon Israel from MJBiz Daily's International Bureau. Solomon?
I'm Solomon Israel from Marijuana Business Daily International, and this is the Weed Talk News Canadian Cannabis Report. Ontario cannabis grower 48 North has closed its outdoor cultivation site. The company previously pitched outdoor growing as a low-cost way to grow marijuana when the farm opened in 2019. This week, it said it was changing that strategy in the face of an oversupply situation that's affecting producers across Canada. And Canopy Growth Corporation has hired its first ever Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Samaya Emeedu will fill that role. She was previously Director of Diversity and Inclusion at Charles Schwab. Canopy said the hire was motivated by, quote, the history of racial inequities surrounding cannabis prohibition and the resulting disproportionate social justice consequences. You can read those stories and more at mjbizdaily.com. I'm Solomon Israel for Marijuana Business Daily.
Just in case you didn't know, this weekend in Ann Arbor, Michigan is one of the longest running celebrations of all things cannabis. It's called the Hash Bash, and PCM TV on Roku and the entire Pro Cannabis Media Distribution Network will be carrying that event live and then repeating it next week on our weekly rotation of programs on our Roku channel. Our Michigan correspondent is Rick Thompson. He's on the organizing committee that will feature their governor, musicians, and sports legends from Michigan who are all pro-cannabis. Here's Rick's report from Michigan.
I'm Rick Thompson from MICBD with this week's Michigan Report for Weed Talk News. Michigan's roadside drug testing program is a huge failure, according to statistical data provided by news source MLive and state-published statistics. The tests are wrong fully 25% of the time, but they're really wrong when testing for opioids and benzos, with false positives being delivered 65% and 60% of the time. The $6,000 machines also delivered false positives in more than 30% of tests involving cocaine and amphetamines. The false positive rate for detecting cannabis was 5%, a failure rate which kills the test's scientific credibility, says Lansing attorney Mike Nichols. Well, the Hash Bash has gone virtual with a big broadcast planned for April 3rd this Saturday. Speakers include the governor, the attorney general, heroes from all major sports, and musical guests too. Tune in at noon on Saturday at the A2 Hash Bash page on Twitch, the Ann Arbor Hash Bash page on Facebook, or join potentially millions of viewers on the Pro Cannabis Media's Roku and Amazon Fire Stick cable networks. There'll be possibly hundreds of people who will defy the virus and attend in person at the Diag on the campus of the University of Michigan. University officials took to media this week to reinforce the campus's no smoking or cannabis possession policy. We hope campus officials will keep a cool head about them this weekend. Remember that it's only a plant, and people are just expressing themselves, not denigrating the school or destroying society. Here's hoping peace prevails on the Diag this Saturday. And that'll do it for this week's Michigan Report. I'm MICBD's Rick Thompson for Weed Talk News.
Now that New York State has legalized, you have to think one of their neighboring states, New Jersey, would be even more motivated to get their market going. However, that is not the case in the Garden State. And our reporter there, Tara Sargente, explains that's not the only development down there this week. Tara?
I'm Tara Masu from Blazin' Bakery, and this is the New Jersey Report for Weed Talk News. This week, Senator Vin Gopal introduced a home grow bill, which would allow all New Jersey residents over the age of 21 to grow up to 6 plants in their home. This is on top of the legalization bill passed earlier this year, which allowed the possession of up to 6 ounces for everyone over 21. Now, the problem here has been there's no way, unless you're a medical patient, for New Jersey residents to actually get cannabis. So this is kind of seen as a quick start to fill a gap here so people don't have to go to the illicit market. Now, the problem here is expecting everyone to suddenly learn to grow their own weed isn't really a long-term solution. So hopefully we'll be seeing adult use cannabis sales by the end of this year, if not definitely by 2021. Home grow is, however, a huge and long overdue win for patients. New Jersey has some of the most expensive cannabis in the country, and that is a huge problem for people who are often lack mobility, have terminal diseases, or on a very controlled income. Also, they are sometimes as far as an hour from a medical dispensary. So home grow is very welcome for patients. Now that ties into our next story, where 2 medical dispensaries are attempting to open 1 block from each other. The parties involved are Harmony, a licensed New Jersey cannabis dispensary that operates in Secaucus. The interesting thing is the suing party doesn't actually have a license. It's Terrapin, who is Colorado-based, a multi-state operator, already with dispensaries in Colorado, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. So Terrapin, much like 100 other applicants or more in New Jersey, doesn't have a license, but has been in the cannabis scene in New Jersey. I've seen them around since 2018. This property they have was just put under control this past September. So they may be suing for a property of a license they don't have in a round that didn't happen yet. Secaucus has one, and they are going to be allowed to operate. The reason this has become such an issue is because being 1 block from a train that goes directly into New York City is a huge opportunity for cannabis tourism. Though with New York now legalizing, it is perhaps not as big an advantage as it was a week ago. This has been Tara Masu, and that's the New Jersey Report for Weed Talk News.
Dominating the Illinois cannabis scene this week is the report on the federal investigation of Green Thumb Industries that Deborah Borchardt talked about earlier in the show. Now let's get more from Normal's Margot Vasili, our Illinois correspondent. Margot?
I'm Margot Vasili from Margowana, and this is this week's Weed Talk News from the Illinois market. A Chicago-based cultivator and dispenser is rapidly growing into one of the leading top pot firms in the nation, is under federal investigation for a possible pay-to-play violation after its push for coveted licenses in the state of Illinois. Investigators have been scrutinizing campaign donations and other steps that Green Thumb Industries took as it sought to secure growing and distribution licenses within Illinois and several other states. Illinois' lawmakers have narrowly allowed a bill to move to the House floor that would automatically legalize all cannabis possession laws regardless of any amount. House Bill 3085 was approved on a 10-8 vote Tuesday morning in the House of Judiciary and Criminal Committee. The bill's language removes all criminal penalties for possession of any amount of cannabis and automatically expunges any criminal record for someone convicted of a similar offense. Subject to regulatory approval, Parallel is expected to own 6 Illinois dispensary locations, which will expand Parallel's active operations to 6 high-growth limited license states: Florida, Massachusetts, Texas, Pennsylvania, Nevada, and Illinois. That's the Illinois Report. I'm Margot Viselli from Margowana from Weed Talk News.
And finally, tonight, another indicator of just how big the cannabis industry is becoming. St. Patrick's Day is March 17th, of course, and traditionally, that's a big party day with plenty of Guinness and other beer consumed. But now weed is entering the competition with $89 million sold on this past St. Patrick's Day of 2021. Now, no sales figures on this year's beer sales, but in 2020, right around the COVID shutdown last year, $245 million of beer was sold. So in sports, 245 to 89 is a rout, but everyone goes home happy and celebrates our Irish friends and traditions. So with that, we wish you all a happy Passover and a happy Easter. That's Weed Talk News for this week. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. PCM TV is supported by Salient Systems, a world leader in video management security, and by Revolutionary Clinics, a medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Accounting Buds, your number one CPA specialist for the cannabis industry.
Hi, I'm Ben Schauer, New England rep for Salient Video Management Systems. Let me tell you what makes us different in the security space. We're your trusted advisors for all your security needs. I know how complicated the regulations are in cannabis, and working with Salient Systems will be the polar opposite of that. I give free consultations and will walk you through every step of the process so that you can get what you need at the price you can afford. We're robust, we're simple and scalable. We're Salient Systems, your solutions to all your security needs. Please contact me at the information below, and I'm looking forward to being your trusted advisor.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first. Pro Cannabis Media programming is available live and on demand on our Facebook page at Pro Canna Media, on Instagram at Pro Cannabis Media, on LinkedIn also at Pro Cannabis Media, on YouTube and YouTube Live on Pro Cannabis Media, Twitter at Pro Canna Media, and on twitch.tv/Pro Cannabis Media. So like, share, and subscribe to all of our content, newsletters, and shows live or on demand.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.